in the words you give us this evening. In your name I pray. Amen. You may be seated. We are in day 8 of the Red Letter Challenge. How many of you brought your books ready to follow along? Oh, fine. Well, there we go. Yay. Teacher's pet. No, I'm just kidding. Good. No, we're going through the Red Letter Challenge, and on Wednesdays we will be taking a look at whatever day that is. So next week it'll be day number 15, so you can look ahead and see what we'll be discussing for the Red Letter Challenge. Tonight we're in day 8. But before we get there, I thought it'd be good to go over, right now we're in this week of being. This is the first week. We've got be, forgive, serve. You can even read it on my shirt, right? So we're in the be week. So I thought we'd go over this together. Let's say this out loud. God is not confined to a building or a time frame, and neither is our worship. That's actually day 8. But the B part of this is our doing flows out of who we are and who we become when we spend time with Christ. And that's carrying us through this week. In fact, that should carry us through the entire Red Letter Challenge, because this describes our life. What Christ has determined us to be, that then we are. And that's what we're doing here in the Red Letter Challenge. So that does bring us to day number 8, and we're going to be looking at day number 8, and the whole subject matter for day number 8 is worship. You know, kids are not all that subtle about what they want. You know, whatever it is they want, they let you know, right? They're going to let you know. And as we grow older, we become a little more sophisticated and all that. But that's still what we do, right? If we want something, we're going to find ways to let our loved ones or whoever know. That even comes in the heat of the moment. So we can grow up, but we're still kids at heart when it comes to trying to get what we want. When I was growing up, my hero was Johnny Bench. That's not Johnny Bench, by the way. Not by a long shot. I did not have his big hands, long arms, or power stroke. I can remember being glued to a TV set in 1972. It's Red versus the Pirates, and I was saying to the TV, "Hit a home run, Johnny!" And guess what? He hit a home run. Bottom of the ninth, tied the Pittsburgh Pirates. They went on to the World Series. Johnny Bench was my hero. So by the time I got to this age, what did I want on my red shirt? They had iron-ons back then. You could buy them at Kroger's. And so I had number 5 ironed to the back of my shirt along with B-E-N-C-H, Bench. I was hoping to be what I worshipped. Obviously, you can look at me now and think, what went wrong, right? But the interesting thing is, that was just a snippet, because as I got older, baseball was my idol. And I knew it had become my idol because of the things that would frustrate me and make me upset when I didn't get what I want. Baseball was my heart idol. We have a hard time using that word, idol. You know, when we think of idols, what do we typically think about? Yeah, statues. Statues, and what do you do with a statue that's an idol? You prostrate, right? You get on your knees. We're too Western for that. We're too sophisticated. We don't do that anymore, do we? You know, they carve statues. And when you bow down to that statue, you're hoping that statue is going to do something great for you. And we do that. We don't have the statues anymore, but we do have our idols. We all worship something. We have our idols. Some of us worship a person. For some of us, it's money. Some of us worship toys or stuff. Some of us worship sex. Some of us worship political parties and ideas. Some of us are in love with our careers, and we worship our careers, and we prostrate ourselves down, and we kneel before our careers. Some of us will do anything we can for our reputations. All of these things. things that we worship. And at the heart of our lesson today, if you're following along in your red letter challenge, at the heart of all of this and the idea of worship is idolatry. And our reading for the red letter challenge today comes from it's really an overlooked story in the life of Jesus. In all of the Gospels, in fact, the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the very beginning, they all have the story of Jesus' baptism, and then they have the story of Christ's temptation with the devil in the desert. And it's often overlooked. But at the end of the day, Christ walks out of that wilderness having won for us something that we could not gain on our own. And along the way is this conversation about worship. It's an important story. Jesus versus the devil. And in the midst of all this discussion is a discussion about kingdoms and worship. And the funny thing is, when we start talking about and using that word kingdoms, worship is at the heart of that. And idolatry isn't far behind. It's precisely the point. Idolatry is always about who is going to be king. That's idolatry. And in that nutshell, who's going to be king? Who are we going to worship? In our story, the gospel reading that we just read, Satan offers Jesus all the kingdoms of the world. One caveat that goes along with him offering all these kingdoms is bow down and worship me. He's offering Jesus everything. This whole thing is dripping with irony. One of the questions that always comes up, could Satan have actually given Jesus Christ all the kingdoms of the world that he had to give? And we're not going to answer that question this evening. But there is a bit of irony here. And the first bit of irony really is not whether or not he has the kingdoms to give. It's that he says it. There's always a bit of self-deceit. Self-deceit's part of the devil's persona. After all, this is the guy that thought he could Lucifer, thought he could overthrow God. And that didn't turn out well. And here he is offering Jesus all the kingdoms of the world. It's kind of ironic. The irony is all the kingdoms of the world. If you worship me. Stop and think about that. If somebody offers you all the kingdoms of the world in return for worship, who really owns all the kingdoms of the world? Right? So there's irony there. This temptation of the devil is just totally ironic. The devil is always doing the same thing to us. He's always offering these things, the kingdoms, to us, all the kingdoms of the world. He offers us control. He offers us kingdoms. He offers us a world in which we can be our own God. He offers us the right to determine our own destiny, the right to rule the spheres of our influence. He's offering that to us all of the time. And what's interesting is, in each one of these instances, when he's offering the kingdom, our hearts are at stake. Because he's offering idols. He's offering us things. He is promising something that at the end of the day, he cannot give, but we tend to follow anyway. He captures our hearts in these temptations of the kingdoms of the world. And I thought it'd be good for us to walk. At the back of your bulletin, there are 4 questions. I'm not going to go through every question tonight. We're going to hone in on question number 3, but there are 4 questions that we can ask. How do I know that this is a temptation? How do I know that Satan is after my heart here, or has actually captured my heart? How do I know I've crossed the line into idolatry? We're going to look at number 3. Number 3 is probably the key to all of these. What is it that you want so bad that you are willing to sin in order to get it? What is it that you want so bad that you are willing to sin in order to get it? This happens to us more frequently than we realize. Probably, at least in my life, if you were to follow me around, you'd probably by me doing this every day. Because this really is at the heart of idolatry. It's the heart of what I'm doing when I am sinning. What is it that I not want that I'm not getting? For an example, a couple weeks ago, I'm sitting in my office, my library, and I am working on my SMP program that I'm doing. And if you know me, I'm the kind of a guy who I tend to be singularly focused. I'm zoned in. All right? I don't multitask very well. But I'm zoned in, and I'm writing, and I'm studying, and I've got all this going, and I'm just really comfortable in what I'm doing. And my wife walks in and says, the van needs unloaded, I bought groceries. And in a split second, number 3 is in the crosshairs. Because I don't move, I rationalize, and there's probably a bit of internal debate going on as to, where's Luke? How much help does she need right now? Do I have to do it now? Can I do it later? All this stuff going in my mind. And then I hear the question again. And again, if you saw the layout of our house, it'd be coming from the other end of the house. I'm home, I need help with the groceries. And again, in that moment, in that split second, I sin. Because at this point, I'm starting to think some very ugly thoughts about the situation, about my wife, about the groceries. I don't verbalize them, but I know what's going on internally in here. What is it that I wanted so bad that I was willing to think ugly thoughts and go there in order to make myself feel better? My idol at that point is, I want to stay in the zone. The zone becomes my idol. Peace and quiet become my idol. How many times do I walk through in a busy day? You come home, you hit the door, and what are you looking for? You're looking for a TV remote. I'm looking for a TV remote. I'm looking for a little bit of relaxation, and all of a sudden there's a crisis that has to be dealt with then. And I am violating number 3 quicker than a whistle. Because my peace and quiet is my idol. The stuff that comes flowing out of my mouth. The stuff that's going on in my heart. Not Christ-like at all. I have idols. Dealing with idols. I am putting myself first. I am not serving Emily. I'm not serving my kids. All because I have idols. In that moment, in those moments, I'm looking for control. I'm trying to grasp control back. Control is being taken away in a question. Simple question, groceries. But in that moment, I'm trying to grasp all the control of the conversation back my direction. I'm serving an idol. I am kneeling before an idol of self-preservation, self-sufficiency. I'm no longer about Jesus in the moment. And there stands the devil. And I can see him, and he has been offering me in that moment all the kingdoms of the world, and I went for it. I took it. I grabbed it. So in my sin, as I kneel and I worship my idols, here comes Jesus. And Jesus comes into that wilderness to confront Satan. And he comes with the word. He comes and he says, you can only serve one God. Jesus comes with irony. And the ironic thing is this: Christ is beating irony with irony. Because the irony in you will worship only one God, who is it that is the one God before whom every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. This guy's standing there in front of the devil, and he will do this and do this and do this for 3 years until he takes a crossbeam and he dies under a sign, Christ the King. He does that for us. He goes into that situation, those very temptations that I give into, he doesn't. He wins my salvation in the moment. And then he offers me the very one that has violated all those things that he has given me. He offers me in return for my sin. He gives me his righteousness. That's Jesus. That's what Jesus is doing in the moment. The Jesus that confronted the devil that day ultimately died for us. And then the interesting thing about that then is in dying for us, he then frees us to a life of service, to a life in his kingdom. Romans 12 picks this up. I think Paul is actually thinking about some of this. Brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true worship. And this is the epistle verse that you find in your Red Letter Challenge. It's the backside of what Christ has done for us in the wilderness. Now that he has done this for us, we are now free to live our entire lives. All of our lives are worship. It's not confined to a building. It's not confined to a place. All of our lives are lives of worship. Our lives are no longer dedicated to King Me. I'm now free. I am now free in the moment to go serve Emily and get the groceries. Gladly, right? Gladly. I'm free to do those things because I know that Christ has died for my sin. And he's freed me to do this. Jesus answered the devil. Our red letters for day 8. It is written, worship the Lord your God, serve him only. So when the devil comes tempting you, tempting me, tempting us to grasp and control, we can remind ourselves that there is only one to be worshipped. And this one to be worshipped is the one who died for us and has given us new life and has freed us to live lives of worship. Our life and our worship, not confined to this building, because Christ died so that we could live our lives of worship at work, at home, and in our play. And that's day 8 of the Red Letter Challenge. Let's pray. Jesus, I thank you so much that you confronted the devil that day, and in doing so, won our salvation. The temptations that so often tie us and bind us, the temptations that we are so often prey to, you defeated Satan. I pray that we will rest in the grace that you give us and then live our lives in worship, true worship. Thank you for all that you've done for us in your name.